Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Welcome back to our weekly program. Just one program note, we will be together here throughout most of April. I'll be taking a night off for personal reasons on April 23rd. I also want to invite you to mark your calendars for game night on May 15th. If you'd like to support our congregation and its activities, I invite you to visit birminghamtemple.com. You'll see in the upper right-hand corner, click for donations and other payments. And if you go there, and you'll see our little donations box, you'll be able to drop down and support the spring fundraiser. So I hope you'll give a thought to that. Finally, I want to call a little bit of attention to our newsletter. You know, we put it up on our website every single week, and it's filled with all kinds of information. I have a commentary there, but I also want to point out the social justice section. This is a lively and important part of our congregation's contributions here in Southeast Michigan and on the national scene. We are involved with so many causes. And people often ask me, what can I do? How can I get involved? There's a meeting tomorrow on Zoom, and the link is in the newsletter. There are so many action items that you can find, changing in many cases weekly, and educational opportunities. We are a social justice organization. We believe in Tikkun Olam as a central message of the Jewish experience, and I want to encourage you guys to check it out. This is the weekend of the famous Hash Bash. It's been held on the U of M campus since 1972 on the first Saturday of April. And for that reason, we are having our own examination at the topic tonight of marijuana legalization, federal and state policy reform and destigmatization. And I'll be speaking with Dr. Mike Whitty, who is a member of BT and a prominent humanist and an important figure in the fight for legalization. However, before we get to all of that, let's welcome Shabbat with Lecha Dodi.
Lecha Dodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabla. 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 Likrat Shabbat lehuven elcha, כי את הברכה היא מביאה בשמחה ברינה ובצהלה פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה pnei Shabbat nekabla.
Our ancestors hallowed the Sabbath day. In dark times, it was a refuge for them, and in times of prosperity, it gave them rest and joy. As a community, we celebrate the opportunity to gather, even if only in spirit, and to imagine Shabbat anew. May we too find rest from our stresses and refuge from our cares. May we too feel the warmth of love and a sense of community. May we too feel our joys heightened and our sorrows softened by the love we give and receive. May we be blessed with Shabbat joy. May we be blessed with Shabbat peace. May we be blessed with Shabbat light as we now light our Shabbat candles.
Baruch haor ba'olam, Baruch haor ba'adam, Baruch haor b'shalom, b'shalom, Baruch haor, Baruch haor, Shabbat.
Tonight we come together in an attempt to gain perspective on where we have been and where we are going. No matter where we are right now, home, alone, or in the presence of loved ones, we strive to feel connected as we search for strength, for community, and for gratitude. On this Shabbat, may we lengthen our perspective. May we find the space to question and explore. Together, we share the challenge of an ever-changing world, a world beyond our control. Together, we seek to find meaning, calm our anxieties, understand our purpose. Together, we share the burden and blessing of responsibility. Together, we are a community. We rejoice in that bond as we celebrate Shabbat, and we continue now with this beautiful song, Ani ve'ata, you and I can change the world.
אני ואתה נשנה את העולם. אני ואתה אז יבואו כבר כולם. אמרו את זה קודם, לפניי זה לא משנה. אני ואתה נשנה את העולם. אני ואתה ננסה מהקלה. יהיה לנו רע, אין דבר, זה לא נורא. אמרו את זה קודם, לפניי זה לא משנה. אני ואתה נשנה את העולם.
In this year of challenges, we take inspiration from the words of Eleanor Roosevelt. The encouraging thing is that every time you meet a situation, though you may think at the time it is an impossibility and you go through the tortures of the damned, once you have met it and lived through it, you find that forever after you are freer than you ever were before. If you can live through that, you can live through anything. You gain strength, courage, and confidence by every experience in which you stop to look fear in the face. You are able to say to yourself, I lived through this horror. I can take the next thing that comes along. The danger lies in refusing to face the fear, in not daring to come to grips with it. If you fail anywhere along the line, it will take away your confidence. You must make yourself succeed every time. You must do the thing you think you cannot do. We continue with Efo Ori. As I mentioned earlier, our guest tonight is Dr. Mike Whitty, a longtime member of our congregation, affectionately known to the folks of this area as Dr. Detroit. He is one of our nation's leading experts on many social issues. After a distinguished career as professor of management and labor relations at the University of Detroit Mercy, he remains a sought-after lecturer on futurism, human rights, humanism, and a host of other topics. We've talked to Mike in the past about some of these issues, but tonight we'll be focusing on the conversation about cannabis legalization and destigmatization. Mike's expertise in this area is extensive. He talks about it widely. He's taught drug policy and advocacy at the universities of Michigan and San Francisco. He's been active with NORML, with the ACLU, with Americans for Safe Access, and the Drug Policy Alliance. He is the author of many interesting books and interesting articles and other pieces about the topic, including Healing the Heart and Mind, Cannabis and Human Conscience, and Linking Drug Policy with Civil Rights to End the Racist Drug War, an aspect of which we will be talking about as well. So please enjoy this conversation that Mike and I had earlier this week. Mike, Shabbat Shalom. Thanks for joining us.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you.
Before we get started, I wanted to call people's attention to the latest edition of Humanistic Judaism magazine. Let me pull it back a little bit. The topic is Jews and Cannabis. The artwork on the cover is actually from a famous Jewish avant-garde artist who dabbles in cannabis-based art as well. But the highlight for me, well, I wrote an article for it, so that was the highlight for me. But the highlight of reading for me was your piece on Cannabis Can Heal the Heart and Mind, a Humanist Approach. And I want to commend this article to everybody. And anyway, to get to our conversation, we want to talk about, as I publicized, legalization, and I think we'll spend a few minutes on stigmatization as well. But let's start with your assessment of where we are on a national level.
Well, the MORE Act was passed out of the House. Schumer's pledge to bring it to the Senate. It is, comprehensive and would include descheduling. I am a little bit worried about it getting a high enough priority to have a vote before the off-year election. If it doesn't get the vote before the off-year election, I think they'll at least pass a banking bill. It's a separate segment of the bigger package as a standalone bill. And we'd fall back to state-by-state legalization referenda. Next year would be Ohio, which would be a big pivot, just like New York yesterday going legal is a big pivot for the East Coast and New England. And Ohio would be a big signaler like Michigan for the Midwest. So the best case would be a quick vote and Biden signing, or even Biden could deschedule. He has executive powers to do that. That remains up in the air. Mexico and Canada are both legal. Those are pressure points too. And again, we end up on a state-by-state basis, and there's a legal concept called the state compact principle, which might allow some clever wiggle room to leave the industry some breathing space to continue to develop in the legal states. So it's quite interesting and complex.
Can you explain what rescheduling means?
Well, actually, I should say descheduling, taking cannabis off the schedule of dangerous and serious drugs that are prohibited from use because they have no medical value in the judgment of this statutory approach that was started back in 1937 with Reefer Madness. For heaven's sake, one could argue alcohol has marginal medical value, except in Civil War surgery. So for heaven's sake, if we're just saying this is similar to alcohol, it ought to be regulated like it, taxed and regulated, but treated with respect and moderation and responsible use would go a long way to reducing the stigma that we grew up with and had to live with.
One of the things I found with the stigma is that it represents both ignorance of what cannabis is and how marijuana works. The fact that there's never been an overdose. You certainly can get sick from it. Let's not parry words, but no one's ever died of marijuana overdose. Whereas having worked on college campuses, I can tell you I personally knew 2 students who died of alcohol poisoning over the years that I worked there. When alcohol was prohibited in this country, long before either of our time, when it came roaring back, as it were, that was in part due to the social acceptance of alcohol over thousands of years. Cannabis, though there have been cultures where there was social acceptance, has not had that sort of opportunity to become more socially acceptable. Um, what what are the How do you think that's going to happen?
Well, I think it can happen just like the parallel with gay rights. When some member of your family is gay, it gives you a personal and personalized education about the issue, and it usually comes out all right. And we have to get to a point where people can treat cannabis in that manner as well. That there might be a member of your family who smokes cannabis for their arthritis or getting to sleep or MS or many other applications of pain management, even applications to helping people have transition out of opioid use. And that seems to have a helpful substitutional benefit for people seriously trying to get over opioid addiction, very hard to recover from. So I'm guardedly optimistic that, for example, give another example. We had we're in Birmingham, we had two mainstream professional neighbors come over for dinner in the backyard. And to my amazement, my wife offered marijuana brownies for dessert. I thought to myself, what are you doing? And these two couples quickly put their hands out and were glad to take a marijuana brownie home and quietly try it out, maybe cut it in a quarter and approach it carefully, keep the lights on in the kitchen, and try the little marijuana brownie and see what this is all about. So it does suggest that these are colloquial stories, but direct personal stories that suggest if we're responsible and calm and looking for sensible openings to help people reframe how they see it. It's just about reframing how you see it. Maybe we can have a live and let live approach, and that is one way to diffuse the potency of stigma to do real harm, cost a person a job. Now in California, they're actually trying to give private employees who are medical patients legal rights to use their cannabis, not on the job, not before going to work, but not to be tested and dismissed because they can detect it 90 days ago.
The fear associated with cannabis is not an accident. And I just want to refer people to my article about the real reefer madness in this edition of Humanistic Judaism magazine. This is a humanistic concern for a variety of reasons that I write about, one of which is this idea that was created in a highly racist environment, that marijuana was a curse of foreigners and Black Americans that they were foisting upon the American public. That's what the movie Tell Your Children, which later became known as Reefer Madness, is about. That's what, and I talk about this in my article, the wonderful musical adaptation of that, which points out the hypocrisy in our society. So that's one humanistic concern, is the social equity and social justice one, and how the equal numbers of Black and white people in this country use cannabis, and yet enforcement has been almost entirely upon the Black community. The second is the one that you keep mentioning, and rightly so, a humanistic concern about personal responsibility, particularly with a substance that's been over and over and over demonstrated to have both benefits and to not be anything like, not offer anything like the dangers or risks that are associated with it through the propaganda. So I appreciate that. Are there other humanistic concerns with the legalization?
Well, yes. I taught a course on drug policy at University of Michigan, used the book, The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, a law professor. And this whole class and race, law enforcement, criminal justice piece is being promoted by a great group in Oakland County called Michigan Liberation, trying to reduce cash bail, not jail people for fines and driving without a license, clean up the taxpayer waste in using a simplistic criminal justice model for every vice and venial sin that mankind can invent and create. So I'm thinking that we're making headway on it.
Some recent studies have shown that legalization has not led to an uptick in the use by children or by teenagers at all. That while there is a really surprisingly large demand among adults, in Michigan has shown that based upon the so-called recreational or adult use opening of dispensaries, we haven't seen it with young people. There's no indication, and these are good studies. So anything you want to add before we?
Well, I'll only say I taught college for over 40 years. I always believed the user percentage on campus was about 15% of the students, far lower than many non-users would guess. They would imagine that all college kids, not so. Beer is king. Beer is king. I can reassure some of the congregants not to worry. The beer empire will go on as long as we have Super Bowl.
Well, sadly, actually, when you say beer is king, it is alcohol poisoning that we dealt with when I was, and I had quite a long time as a Hillel Jewish Student Center director at a couple of major university campuses, and it was never marijuana that we had to deal with in an emergency room, or in the 2 cases of students that I knew who died of it, never had to go to a parent and comfort them because their kid had smoked a little too much weed. It was always because they had done something extraordinarily irresponsible with alcohol, wound up in the emergency room, and wound up dead.
Maybe this is inappropriate, but I can't help but wonder, because I've read about these tragic alcohol deaths of fraternity hazing.
Yes.
I mean, God knows, maybe if we would just have a titrated marijuana hazing that would be substituted for the alcohol hazing, we could save lives.
Well, I will tell you, there were a couple of fraternities that were more noted for their laid back sort of stoner personality. And this is, of course, going back into the 90s. When I was primarily on college campus, 90s and early 2000s. But I will also say this, that they were not the ones that I ever had to go and provide any kind of grief counseling for. It was the hazing, and it was in both cases involved hazing and alcohol. So yes, responsibility is a big part of it. These are humanistic concerns. It's one of the reasons that as humanistic Jews, we are interested in this topic. And I want to thank you so very, very much for enlightening. Yes, go ahead.
Well, it's humanistic to minimize jailing, minimize being caught in a situation where police feel they can be extra mean because you're in the wrong neighborhood or you look the wrong way and they can abuse you. So it's humanistic in not having people have fear and excessive punishment, and arresting our way out of a medical psychiatric problem is not the right road.
At the risk of, and this is a bipartisan issue, we should mention, at the risk of self-promotion, I do want to mention my article, The Real Reefer Madness, where I did go through the history of the racist approach to prohibition. All right, we're out of time. Thank you so much. Once again, thanks for being a leader in this very important topic and issue. And Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Peace.
There is a kind of courage required for the task of being human, writes A.C. Grayling. The courage to meet the new and to accept the different in the chances of experience. Rilke gave luminous expression to this idea by saying that we need courage for the most strange, the most singular, and the most inexplicable that we may encounter. He meant the courage to accept love when it offers, to face death when it comes, to bear the burdens that life imposes in return for its gifts, and above all, the courage to create something to mark our own individual responses to the world, however modest. For even when the courage to do this is unostentatious and private, it can make a crucial difference to the content of the quality of our lives. We continue with Naaseh Shalom.
Shalom.
In this community where we find strength and common purpose, we turn our minds and our hearts to all those who need our love and support, those who are ill, those who suffer pain of the body or spirit, those who are lonely, those who have been wronged. Our well wishes are extended this Shabbat to these members of our community and to their loved ones, to Rob Lasker, Brina Broder, Ruth Moltz, Joe Gaden, Julia Eliason, Karen Tremper Harris, Myron Tink, and Rabbi Peter Schweitzer. May all who suffer know that they are not alone. May they be healed quickly. May they experience a complete recovery, refuah shlema, the renewal of their bodies and the renewal of their spirits. Our thoughts turn to those who are no longer with us, our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, and those of every people and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and death. We recall now our loved ones whom death has recently taken from us, those who died at this season in years past, and those whom we have taken into our hearts with our own. Tonight, our entire community, indeed, everyone who knew and loved Marilyn Rowans, anyone who was involved in humanistic Judaism, is mourning her recent death. She was a towering figure in our movement, a wonderful woman whose legacy will be held close by all of us who have appreciated the work she did to building up our institutions, notably our congregation and the International Institute for Secular Humanistic Judaism. She was the first ever recipient of the Sherwin T. Wine Lifetime Achievement Award. We will be mourning her death together as a community next Friday. Look for your emails for details of that. It'll be at noon on Zoom. And we remember her tonight with love and gratitude for all that she did, as we extend our deepest condolences to all who mourn her, her family, and her loved ones. Tonight we also observe the yahrzeits of Molly Arking, Philip Ash, Stan Beltzman, Rose Bricker, Elise Buckner, Francis Burke, Arlene Bernstein, Francis Cousins, Abe Green, Fred Kellman, Adrian Mendelson, Saul Plafkin, Benjamin Jacob Roast, Helen Shernitt, Sybil Siegel, and Max Weinstock. Yehi zichram livracha, may memories of each of these beloved people provide a measure of comfort to those who face the world in their absence. Next week, we will be observing Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Memorial Day. Our guest will be Renee Lichtman, a member of our congregation, a child survivor of the Holocaust. He produced a movie a few years ago. We'll take a look at an excerpt from that that's available online easily for folks to witness as well. And we will conclude now wishing you a Shabbat Shalom with this beautiful song, May We Know Peace. Goodbye, everybody. Shabbat Shalom.
May